In the next two lectures, you'll learn about the levels and curves adjustments in Photoshop a little bit more in depth, and these can be powerful tools for adjusting tonality in images. So go ahead and open up Zoom and Navigation Beach and Kelly.jpg, or you can open up a photo you've taken just to practice on. And if you go to Image, Adjustments, and then Levels, you'll see this little hill here. A lot of people are confused about what this does, and in the next one I'll show you, we'll do this as an adjustment layer, but this one's a little bit larger, so I'll keep this one on the screen. So you'll notice this image is very heavily weighted to the left. That means there's more pixels that have just darker tones. All right, so it might be saying it's a little bit underexposed, but a lot of nighttime photos will look like that. Sometimes when photos are underexposed, they'll look like that. So if I move this out of the way and make sure preview is checked, and click and drag this midtone slider, it's this little gray arrow over to the left, I think that improves this photo a little bit. You can see the before and after, it's not as dark. It's balanced a little bit better as far as the lighting goes. Now if you bring this one over, it's going to make it a little bit darker obviously, and you'll bring this one over. If there's ever there's just no pixels on an image, like say there were just right here, there were no pixels right there, what you can do is just click and drag so it begins wherever that kind of mountain range begins. Right now it begins on the edge, so we want to keep those on the left and the right. But a lot of people are confused about what these actually do, and it's easier to make adjustments once you truly understand it. So this top one right here, the black arrow, if I click and drag it over, you'll see that makes the dark areas, the shadows, darker. And the one on the right, this makes the highlights, or the lighter areas, lighter. And it doesn't affect the darker ones as much, as you can see. And those are the input levels. If you look at the output levels, it does the opposite. The shadows of the dark areas become lighter, so you open up those shadows. And then on this side, the lighter areas become darker. So just to review, darker becomes darker, lighter becomes lighter, lighter becomes darker, and darker becomes lighter. So that's what those sliders do. We're adjusting by default RGB, the red, green, blue channels. You can click there and adjust each channel individually if you wanted. And you can also set the darkest point with the black eyedropper tool there. So if you found an area that was just completely black, you could click that. You can really mess up an image. I mean, if you click an area that's not completely black, but so I'll click maybe somewhere in there. And then if you set the white area, and I'd probably want to zoom in, but and there's the before and then after, so it's slightly different. And you can also set the gray point by using that middle eyedropper. You could try auto and see what it is telling you to do and see that before and after. It's very subtle, but it's better to make a manual adjustment. And you can use auto as a starting point if you want and see what Photoshop thinks that we should do to make it a better looking photo, but we're going to be able to make the photo look better than an auto setting in Photoshop. If you do some kind of settings and you like it and you think it'll work on other photos, you can save it as a preset up here. There are also a couple presets up here like darker, increased contrast, and so on, so you can check those out. Now remember, we don't want to go up to image adjustments levels. What we want to do, unless you're just editing one layer and you don't care about adjusting the effect later, but if you do, click down here, the bottom of the layers panel, and there's create a new adjustment layer. Remember, we want to do that. If you go to levels, same exact menu, it's just a little bit different color depending on your presets you have in Photoshop. I'll move the layers over here a little bit. And so this does the same thing. Dark becomes darker, light becomes lighter, dark becomes lighter, lighter becomes darker, and so on. So if you did do some kind of adjustment here, and then this is the great thing about an adjustment layer, I can double click it and it's a live effect. We can adjust it, and it also comes with a mask. So if you wanted to paint out some of the areas that you didn't want affected, let's say you didn't want the grass affected, you could paint some black onto that mask and it would mask out so it's not affected on certain areas of the image. So that's how levels works. If you want to open up a landscape example, if I go to, let's use the adjustment layer here and go to levels, you'll see this one is the opposite. Instead of being underexposed, or according to Photoshop, there's even some hot spots. You can see right here, It's way off the scale there as far as there's a couple areas that are just completely white, meaning the content wasn't white. It's just basically so bright it blows out the photo. So you don't want things completely black, completely white unless the content was that, unless this is a nighttime photo or some kind of special circumstance like that. But what you can do to improve this one, if I hit auto, it's going to say, we'll bring this one up a little bit. And that is kind of reasonable. If there were absolutely no pixels here, we'd want to bring that up until where there's pixels start to show up. And you can adjust this middle one, and then you can toggle the visibility of it and see before and after. It just pops out a little bit more. There's more contrast. If the thing is too heavy, you can bring that over to the left, before or after. So it's very subtle. Some of the best lighting adjustments in Photoshop are going to be very subtle. So that's how you use levels in Photoshop. I will see you in the next lecture.